morning, everybody. I hope you had your sound up and that got you rolling. So hello to you who have cameras on. Well, I'll say cameras are not required. In fact, we're making a couple of changes to our monthly sessions because we heard so many of you are driving in. And I will say kudos to Lance this morning because he's at, and I guess hopefully you're getting near Love Field Airport, but he sent me a picture of what traffic looked like this morning. But one of the adjustments that we're making as people are coming on to our monthly sessions is I'm going to do a little bit of teaching this morning, and then towards like probably around 8:45, I'll try to wrap it up so that we can have that time for those of you who want to go into breakouts. We'll do those sometimes, or just kind of have an open time of Q&A. Because I know a lot of you are driving in or you're getting ready for your 9 o'clock power meeting. If you are driving, be safe. And the other thing I always like to remind you, if you're sitting in traffic, don't complain about traffic because you are traffic. All right, so that's so important that we're not complaining about the things that we're creating. But I just want to thank you guys for investing the time that I know is so precious. And I always want this to be extremely valuable. In fact, the very reason why we started these monthly sessions is I wanted to bring together, we get to work with high performers across so many different industries. And I wanted to bring together once a month in 60 sacred minutes, these high performers. The idea here is to give you some really practical information so that you could apply it. Always want to make sure that whatever we're teaching is applicable to your life instantly. The other is to give you some inspiration. In fact, I'm pumped up today about where we're going because in this entire 2024 Leading Lab Monthly Series, we're talking about more in 24. And one of the reasons is the challenge I've given to this group, and I'll continue to give to this group, is this year, find your limits. I really do believe that we were made for this. In fact, when I started this company back in 2001, it was because I genuinely, to my core, believe that we all have a message, and you have a unique style of delivering that message that hasn't been given to anyone else, and that we are here to honor and protect that gift no matter what. I want you to think about this word growth, because our focus in February is, where do you want to grow? Where do you want to grow? So I want to plant that idea early on. If you can get to your chat, I want to ask you to just, if you don't mind, you can tell which organization you're with or just what industry that you're representing today. What industry are you representing today? And one other thing, okay? I know that's asking a lot before maybe your second cup of coffee, but one other thing I want you to share with us is, what is a gain you've already had in 2024? Okay, so we have 315 days left in this year. We're like almost dead center, if not dead center, in Q1. I want you to take a moment to celebrate a gain that you've already had in 2024. So if you don't mind putting those two things in chat. One of the reasons why I think this is so important is because things are only what they are when you compare it to something else. Great example this weekend. We were in beautiful Oklahoma City. It was cold, maybe one of the coldest softball games I've ever sat through. And then when we get here, we're talking to our family, and they were talking about how cold it was this weekend. We were like, cold? Let me tell you, cold. So our cold was only cold compared to something else, but I can only imagine if I were in some of the states some of you guys are in, how much colder it would have been. Things are only let's say hot when compared to something else, right? Things are only expensive when compared to something else. Recently, I was helping my son find a truck, a used truck. And I remember one of the trucks we looked at, the first thing that I thought was, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. Until we went to a couple of other dealerships, and then suddenly it wasn't so expensive. So, in other words, things are what they are only when we compare it to something else. So I want to challenge you right now to think about this idea of gaps and gains. Because when we think about if we're using the ideal as our standard, it's easy to get into this gap energy, to only think about all the things that we haven't done yet. Okay. But I want you for a moment to use the standard of where did you start in 2024? Because when you look at that, all of a sudden you see all of these gains. And I just want to thank the team that I get to work with every single day. We were on our team meeting yesterday, and I was just overwhelmed with gratitude of all the gains that we've been able to make in such a short period of time. So big celebration there. Thank you for doing that. We got we've got contractors and we've got healthcare, and I'm just seeing all of your gains. And here's my challenge to you. We really want to live at our best in 24. We really want to grow. We have got to stay and gain energy. We've got to stay in the gains, focused on the gains, like somewhere, write that down, stay in the gains. And it's more than just touchy-feely, happy-clappy, but we know that your brain is actually 30 to 35% more productive when we are focused on our gains, because gain is life-giving. It's giving us motivation and energy, and it's activating an incredible part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that allows us to imagine something different. So when you're thinking about growth, that's the thing that allows us to imagine what we want to grow. When we get into that gap energy, that's that deficit. That's where we operate out of threat and fear. And I don't know about you, but anytime I've made a decision out of fear or scarcity or threat, it has not been a decision I've been really proud of in the long term. Like, can I get an amen to that? Yes. Okay. All right, we're going to roll. Listen, if this is your first leading lab, you picked the perfect place to start. I love this topic. Our idea, remember, was to bring leaders together from different industries every single month, hopefully give you a shot of inspiration, give you some information, and then send you back out on your way, changing the world. So if you've joined us before, many of you have, I'm seeing familiar faces and names. Man, thanks for coming back. I cannot tell you what it means. And I hope that you get as much out of this today as I have in preparing for it. But I really do want you to think about, where do you want to grow? Some of you, that's going to be, I want to grow personally. Like, this is the year for me to really invest in me and grow, and that's okay. Some of you want to grow the teams around you. Maybe you've got a new team. Maybe you are recognizing things about your team that could be even better. That's the best place to be when the team's not broken. They're already high performing. So how could we get them even better? Some of you may be growing your entire company and thinking about, what do you want the end of this year in 315 days? What do you want to be growing so that you're harvesting what you're planting right now? So I want to tell you just a really quick story. Some of you have heard this more than you probably want to, but one of maybe the darkest times in my life to date, and the darkest times in my business, was somewhere around 2013, 2014, when our personal life had just, man, we found ourselves in a really scary place. I found myself a single parent with a 7th grader and a 9th grader. Some of you who've been through that season know it is the hard, well, maybe not the hardest because I haven't gone through all the seasons yet, but it is one of the hardest seasons of life. It is one of the most expensive seasons of life. And I'm also self-employed. It was a tough time. And I literally was on the floor in this same office because I was so committed to this idea that what I do is my calling. And I didn't want to give it up. And that phrase, no matter what, was ringing in my head. And I knew I wanted to grow. I knew I needed to grow, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how. And I knew that if I could have gotten there on my own, I would have been there already, because I can outread you, I can outwork you, I can stay up later than you, I can do all of those things. But all of those things weren't getting me the result that I wanted. And so as we talk about growth today, I wanted to share with you a few things. I wanted to share with you a few of the critical obstacles I see in people and teams and organizations growing. And this is something that I've not only experienced myself, but I work with you guys every single day. I've sat through hours and hours and hours of coaching conversations, of working with teams. This is what we do every single day. And as I prepared, I really reflected on what are maybe 2 or 3 of the biggest obstacles that I see, hopefully to help you get to where you want to be a whole lot faster. I wanted to touch on just a second with each one of those obstacles, why these are obstacles. Like, what is it that's preventing you from getting maybe the results that you're looking for? But most importantly, giving you some really practical solutions. So hopefully it'll be note-taking worthy this morning as we go through this. So listen, I'm putting it in high gear and I'm moving forward, but at any time, please feel free to interrupt me. I have no problem with it at all. Feel free to challenge me. I have no problem with that at all either. I don't have all the answers for sure, but I will say, we do a lot of deep work in this area of growth. So if you're taking notes, here's the first obstacle that I want to start with: our beliefs about growth. Okay, if you've been with me for a while, no eye rolling around, oh, here we go again. We're talking about this belief thing, but it's so important. I don't want to miss it. Okay. Caesar, I saw those eyes, so don't do that to me. But good morning. Listen, this model changed my life. This is one of them that changed my life, and we use it every single day. And it sounds so simple until it isn't. But you think about the results that you've already created, and those results that you've created are coming from actions you're taking or you're not taking. Okay. And some of those results you love and you want more of them. Man, we've created a lot of great things. Some of the results in your life, you don't want more of that, but you keep creating the same results. Now, here's where we tend to go to as humans. We tend to want to change actions to get us different results. And sometimes that works. Sometimes that's going to give you short-term difference in results. But where we really shift is when we get to looking at our beliefs. Okay? When our beliefs shift, the results are a natural outcome and they're sustainable. So when I'm on the floor in this office and I'm recognizing I want a different result, I was taking different actions, not necessarily the actions I should have been taking, but the actions that felt right. I wasn't getting different results. What really needed to shift were my beliefs. So, okay, so hang in there with me a minute. How do you get new beliefs? You've got to have new experiences. So here's what happens. We tend to recycle the same experiences, the same beliefs, and then we expect different results. That's clearly one of the definitions that's used a lot for insanity. But I want to give you maybe a practical example. Let's say one of the results that you're creating right now is that you're overwhelmed, your schedule is packed, you cannot do one more thing. Maybe your calendar looks like a jar of jelly beans right now. It's like it's filled to the brim. There's nothing else that you can do. I could give you 500 actions: how to block your calendar, how to say no, how to have the miracle morning, all the things that you can read. But until we shift your beliefs, we're really not going to get sustainable results. Your current rules are creating your current results. If we want different results, we have got to have an open hand, an open mind, if you will, around what are the rules that are driving those results. And those rules are being driven by some of your beliefs about growth. So I want to offer a couple of different ones. So one of the things that I want you to think about when you think about growth, right, take a deep breath, because this one's going to be a hard one. Like I got slapped in the face with this last year in a big way. You can have control or you can have growth, but you can't have both in equal proportion simultaneously. So when we say this is where I want to grow, I just want to question you, really, like, is that your belief? Or is it your belief? Most of us really, like if we were to truly admit it, sitting around a cup of coffee or happy hour, most of us would agree we're choosing control over growth. Okay. But I want you to think, where do you want to grow right now? And where are you potentially choosing control over growth? I got one more belief that I want you to challenge you. Listen, you can be comfortable and stay where you are. And there wouldn't necessarily be anything wrong with that. If that's where you want to be, if you're okay with that. We work with high performing people. Most of the time, they really don't want to stay where they are. But you can be comfortable there. Or you can be uncomfortable and you can have growth. But the key there is knowing that if we are judging growth based on how we're feeling, we're using the wrong measurement. Right? It's sort of like when you made a commitment to working out, I guarantee you're going to wake up in the morning and you're not going to feel like it, right? Not being driven by what's comfortable and what's uncomfortable. Because growth, when you think about where you are versus where you want to be, growth is never a straight line. Growth looks more like this. You're going to feel like you're out of control at times. It's going to be messy. It's going to be uncomfortable. It may actually feel like you're doing all the wrong things. So, all right, going back to my story, when I got really serious about growth, personally, with my company, with my team, everything, I remember literally praying for a year, like bring somebody into my life that can show me what I can't see. Because again, I could work harder, I could read more, but it wasn't getting me different results. So when I met my coach that I work with even today, I knew, oh my goodness, this person gets me. They've been able to produce the results that I'm wanting. Let's roll. Until he told me how much it was going to cost. So I had a kind of moment, and it was uncomfortable. But I would rather be uncomfortable and move into growth. Like when you think about fear and you think about faith, both of them are unseen. Fear is hesitating the thing that you can't see, because your brain doesn't like confusion. And faith is following the things that you can't see. So let's choose faith over fear sometimes. And that's exactly what I did. But I just want you to know that if you're somewhere in this messy middle, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Okay. That means maybe you need to pause and take a look around. Maybe you need to redirect. But growth is never a straight line. The messy middle is part of it. So, number one, around your growth, are you holding beliefs and are you creating experiences that are actually going to help you get the results that you want? Or are you recycling old experiences and old beliefs expecting a different result? That was number one. Okay. Number two obstacle that I hear every single day is about your team. So my question to you here is, how are you building your growth team? And your results are only going to grow at the pace that you are growing and at the pace that you're growing those around you. Again, back to that whole control versus growth thing, because this is going to be uncomfortable. So I just want to pose a few questions as you think about what it is. Where do you want to grow? First of all, are you growing yourself? I was working with a group about a year ago, and I remember starting out our session asking these people in important leadership roles, what are you reading right now? What are you listening to right now? Silence. Silence. Now, I'm not judging them, I'm not coming down on them, because very often when you're so in the weeds, when you're so tactical, you don't have the time, the capacity to grow yourself. Well, that needs to shift. That's a belief shift that needs to happen, because people, your results and the people around you are only going to grow at the pace that you're investing in yourself. So are you growing yourself? Now, here's the coolest thing about that. We live in a time where if you're ignorant about anything, that's on you. We have access to every thought leader who's ever lived in every modality possible. We've got access to it. Well, the very fact that you're here this morning means you're growing yourself. So maybe you pass this along to somebody else. Here's my second question. Not only are you growing yourself, are you building a growth team? Do you know who's on your growth team? And do you have a plan for growing them? And then my third question is, are you empowering your growth team? Or are you debilitating or stifling your growth team? So as I was building this section of our Leading Lab this morning, I want to use a baseball analogy. Okay? Maybe because I was at softball games this weekend. I don't know. But this was the example that comes to mind. I love visuals. So I want to ask you, which of these teams is most likely going to win the World Series? Would you say this team right here? Or would you say this team? Okay, spoiler alert. We have to celebrate this as long as we can. Now, a couple of things that at least I want to point out, and we can talk about this later, but all right, so sheer numbers is pretty impressive. But I want you to think about, when you think about your team. So in baseball, you only have 9 players on the team at any given time. But man, when you're thinking ahead and you're thinking about what's the next generation of leaders and what's our bench strength and what's our succession plan, then your team's going to grow. So who's going to replace you? By the way, life is short. If you haven't noticed, like, who's going to replace you if something were to happen, or if you want to step down, or if you want to go to the next level? Who are you grooming to take your place? So we got sheer numbers. We've got better bench strength, clearly. I think the team below this is probably investing in themselves more intentionally. But I can't let this pass because I do believe in the life-changing transformation coaching. If you'll look at this team, they've got a team of coaches that are with them nonstop. They are looking at how their body is positioning when they bat. So they're looking at the micro actions. They're also looking at the macro actions. That's what a great team of coaches does. That's why we have coaches. This is why I believe in it so much. So I wanted to, as I thought about this and building the bench strength of your team, one of the things that came to mind is this guy's story right here. So in 2020, I think it was, the Texas Rangers, they actually brought Chris Young on as their general manager. And there's some lessons that I just wanted us to glean very quickly this morning around this guy right here. Because at one point in his career, he was a player, right? He was a pitcher. He was on the field. And what was making him successful at that time was his ability to pitch. That was the skill set that he needed to be successful. And when he was pitching, this was his perspective. He was on the mound. Okay, I'm not a pitcher, but I know a few things, and I would just imagine a few things that a pitcher's really focused on hitting their spots. Right? They're focused forward, but even that forward focus is pretty focused. All right. And by the way, if you missed our January leading lab, that's what we focused on, was focus. How do you get focused on what it is, where it is that you want to grow? So his perspective was here. But when he became the general manager, his perspective shifted dramatically. So yes, does Chris Young go down on the field and work with the players from time to time? Yes, he does. But for some of us, when you think about growth, what really needs to shift when we think about our growth team is our perspective. So in other words, you're no longer on the fields, maybe in a uniform every day. You know, you're not pitching the ball and then running to catch it and then running over to right field to catch it and then throwing it over to second and so forth and so on. Maybe one of the things that's so important for you to grow your team is to change your perspective. Second thing that happened with Chris Young is the skill set that made him successful in his initial role had to change. He had needed to have a different skill set. So leadership, growing a team, having a different perspective, that's an important skill set that we've got to develop if we really want to grow those around us, right? So part of, I'm just challenging you to think about, where do you maybe need to shift your perspective in how you're growing your team? So a few things that I thought might be helpful. By the way, you know, like, what's so awesome about his story is that he ended a 63-year drought. 63 years of not making it to the World Series. When you bring somebody on who knows the game, but is able to maybe shift out of the day-to-day and keep that bigger perspective. So for some of you, that may be the change that you need to make your team grow around you. So is it time to change your view? The other thing that I wanted you to think about is, when you think about where you want to grow, a few questions. Are you clear on who is on your growth team or who isn't? Because sometimes you had players on your team that were great contributors, but maybe it's time to rotate some of those people off and build a new growth team. That accountability piece is very important. Thinking about, not only are you clear on who's on your growth team, but are they clear on how their role aligns with the growth that you're seeking. There's a cool book called The Most Important Number. When you think about growth for you, what would be that most important number? And as you build your team, are they clear on that most important number? That how their efforts align to get you there. And not only the most important number, like what the end goal is, but are they clear on how you expect them to get to that end goal? So are they clearly aligned with the goal and your vision, your values to getting there? Super, super important to growing your growth team. And then the final thing is, do you have a clear plan on how you're going to grow that growth team, each individual member and the team as a whole? We could spend like the rest of the day on that one question alone. There's so much that we've learned about how to better delegate. Delegate is developing others. If we had time, we could go around the room right now, and my guess is the greatest growth you've had is because someone delegated things to you and trusted that you had the capacity to do it. Someone at some point had already asked themselves, do I want control or do I want growth? They chose growth. They delegated things to you. Well, we want to do that for those around us in order to really grow our growth team. Honestly, how many of you could look back in your career now and go, I cannot believe they trusted me with that? We've all been there, but that's how you got to where you are today. And if you want to get out of those weeds, out of the day-to-day, have that different perspective, we got to think about how are we getting better at delegating. Like, when you go back to this model right here, before you just, hold on to the belief that it's faster if I do it myself, or if I want it done right, I have to do it myself. Another belief I hear a lot is my people are already overwhelmed. I can't ask them to do one more thing. We all hear it. All I want you to know is that as long as you're hanging on to that, you're going to create the same result of overwhelm. So we go deep, deep, deep into delegation, but I did want to share with you a few questions. If I had to say, here are my top 4 or so, I don't know how many I have here, but what are my top ones that I would have you think about when you think about what do you need to delegate? First of all, look at your calendar, like today or this week. What is one thing you could delegate? All right, if you had to, your life depended on it, what is one thing that you could delegate? So get clear on what needs to be delegated first and foremost. What is it that you're maybe running around on the field doing that somebody else could do and actually might want to do? Because the second part of this question is not only what needs to be delegated, to whom do you need to be delegating it? Well, do they have the skill set? Do they have the interest? You got people around you who aspire to be in your role. So what kinds of experiences could we be helping them get right now so that they're in a better position to do it? Because when you say to someone, I want to hand this project to you, and here's why, because I know that one day you want to be in this role, you're not dumping it on them. That's true delegation. Here's another one that if you think about one thing you could delegate and you've got an idea of who you could delegate it to, great question to ask yourself, what does winning look like in this delegation? Because if you're not clear in your own head, I guarantee you they're not going to be clear and you're probably not going to get the result that you're wanting. It's a great question to ask. Finally, I think maybe I have one more. The other question that I want you to think about is, all right, so I'm clear on the need, who I'm delegating it to, what winning looks like. I want you to ask yourself, how much autonomy are you going to give to this person? Maybe they're new, so you don't give as much. Maybe you don't have as much trust in them. Or maybe you know they're experienced, you know they're trustworthy, so you can give a lot of autonomy. But you also want to think about the task. Some of you, we've worked with electricians. Okay, you don't get creative rights on how you wire a building. There's not a lot of autonomy in that. Like, it needs to be done exactly. It's a high compliance. But if it's not high compliance, I want you to just think through, maybe there are many ways to getting a good result. And it doesn't have to be your way. Going back to the control versus growth question. And then the final question to ask when you think about growing your growth team through delegation, how will you hold them accountable? When do you want check-ins? And here's why this question's so important. It avoids creating the results that I often hear, which is, I don't know if it's getting done. And I don't want to check in with them because then it looks like I'm micromanaging. Here's what I want you to see. You created that. But the good news is if you created that, you can create something else. Because if we'd had this conversation from the beginning of a deadline or how you want to be checked in with or whatever, you wouldn't have created that weird, awkward space. You guys know what I'm talking about. So maybe some of those questions will be helpful to you. I'm moving to my third obstacle that I see a lot when it comes to either accelerating growth or hindering growth. That is your culture. Now, here was the image that came to my mind when I thought about this, because I live in the big city of Farmersville, Texas, home of the fighting farmers. So farmers aren't really that mean, okay? But farmers are wise. There are so many life lessons and there are so many leadership principles that you can glean from talking to a farmer. And I just wanted to pull out a couple of them this morning. One is that clearly, if you want to reap corn, you're going to need to sow corn. Right? If I want to grow wheat, I've got to plant wheat. So when you think about what is it that you want to grow, we've got to think about, how are we planting that? How are we investing our energy, our attention, and our resources into what we want to grow and into ensuring that growth? There's another idea here. You can't expect the result without the investment. I just want to say it one more time. You can't expect the result without the investment. Because when we think about this whole idea of farming, you've got to invest in the process. I was talking to a farmer this weekend and asking some questions about this. So, I think wheat is their biggest crop. And he talked about, you got to plant it at a certain time of the year. You got to fertilize it so much. You've got to give it time. There's got to be so much rain that comes in order to really reap that harvest. But we can't expect that harvest unless we're willing to make the investment of our energy, our attention, and our resources. Now, here's the coolest thing. If we create the right culture, like if we get all those elements right, at least the elements that we can control, there's a lot of elements that we can't. But if I know if I plant corn at a certain time of the year, and I put this much fertilizer in it, and I do this, the result is a natural outcome. So I want you to just ask yourself, am I creating a culture that is actually going to produce what I'm wanting to grow? So let's say one of the things that you want to grow this year is innovation. Are you creating the environment, the culture, where innovation could actually grow in the first place? Because if you've got an environment of threat and stress and overwhelm, and people are not trusted, they're not empowered, all those pieces, the likelihood of innovation showing up would be incredibly rare. It would be like planting corn and growing beans. It's probably not going to happen. So I just want you to think about whether it is your own personal growth. Are you creating an environment that promotes the growth you're wanting for your team? What's the culture? What are we doing where are we investing our time, energy, and resources? How are we going to produce what we're looking for? Or maybe it's your entire organization. All right, so look, I got 3 minutes. 3 minutes, and then we'll move into Q&A, or I will let you get back out on the road changing lives. But just really quick recap of the 3 biggest obstacles I know that I deal with when I think about growth, but also all the thousands and thousands of leaders that we've had the privilege of working with over the years. Check your beliefs. Do you have beliefs that are aligned with producing result? Where are you choosing control over growth? Where are you choosing being comfortable over being uncomfortable? The second thing I just want to challenge you with this morning is who's on your growth team, and how are you hindering their growth, or how are you building their growth? And part of you building their growth may be shifting perspective a little bit. It might be shifting some beliefs around that. And then when you're clear on your growth team, who's on that growth team? What's the plan that you're using to grow them individually and as a collective whole? And then finally, just thinking about the culture. I mean, just even a practical question might be, what about our culture right now is like propelling us towards this growth? Like this growth is going to happen because of our culture. And what are some elements of our culture that's actually preventing the growth that we're wanting? Where are we maybe creating the thing that is hindering us from getting the results that we're wanting? All right, so this is truly not a sales pitch, but I will say this: we genuinely get up every single day to help you. And so if anybody ever wants to jump on a one-to-one call, because how this looks like in your life, in your leadership, in your company may be different than others. That's what we do every day. So if you ever want to reach out to us, you can, or right now just in chat say, hey, Sherry, let's set up a call. Because genuinely, let's take a look at where you are, where you want to be, and how we can help you get there. This is what we do every single day. Don't go it alone. And so in this last minute that I have, I do want to do a shameless plug for March, because this first quarter all works together beautifully. In January, we talked about getting focused. February, we're focused on growth. Like, where do you want to grow? What obstacles do you need to remove? And what do you need to put into place? And then when we're together in March, we're going to be talking about efficiency, not as in Six Sigma kind of lean efficiency, though that is really good, but that's not my area of expertise. We're talking about this efficiency right here. How do we work better with this most amazing piece of technology? The very thing that's either going to help us get better results with less effort, or this very thing that may keep us stuck and keep us creating results that actually it may take generations to clean up the mess. So in March, we're talking about efficiency. All right, guys, I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to take the next 15 minutes for those that want to hang around, talk about how this is applied maybe to your world, your organization. But if you've got to go, I want to leave you with 4 words. I mean, I'm going to assume these are words. All right. So stay in the gains. Stay in the gains. Think about where your growth, compare it to where you've been as you think about what do I need to put in place maybe for the rest of Q1, so that at the end of Q1, we are celebrating exactly what we set out to do. stay in the gains. I'll see you back here in March, but for those who want to hang around, I've got time. Have a fantastic day for those of you who are leaving. Thank you, Marie and Caesar, for having cameras on. And David, I always appreciate that.
No
Hi,
problem.
Cody. I hope you are loving your new role. And by the way, Cody is celebrating. He just got his ICF credential. So
Yes,
legit. Hey, Cody, can I ask you a question?
of
I'm always
course.
curious about this because when I went through coach training, I was so arrogant when I started because I thought I've already been coaching. I just need the certification. And then
Right.
30 minutes into it, I realized I hadn't been coaching at all. But I'd love to know, like, coming off of that whole process, what were some of the insights that hit you the hardest?
So I think I can summarize it. I had the opportunity, I'm going to put a plug in. I had an opportunity to go through Christine Conway's effective coach program to prepare me for my ICF. And, in that you get 100 hours before you can take your exam. And I was a little different than you.